U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, and we're having a conversation today about the opportunity for rural America to take advantage of the electric vehicle revolution. I'm joined by two local leaders who I think can help us understand the opportunity and describe what some of the challenges are as well in their community. We have Mayor Ty Coleman of Alamosa, Colorado, as well as, hello Mayor, good morning, good afternoon, depending, I guess good morning where you are. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Secretary Buttigieg.
And we're joined by Commissioner Terrell Clark of Stearns County, Minnesota. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
So as you know, we've got a big opportunity on our hands in terms of electric vehicles and the savings that are available from having an electric car or pickup, if Americans can afford them, if they can find places to charge them, which is exactly what we're working on. So maybe to start our conversation, I'd love to know a little more just about your community and what it's like to commute in and around your community, where most of your residents are driving and where they need to take their cars and pickups on a given day. Commissioner, you want to start?
Sure. Thanks again. So I live in Stearns County, Minnesota, which is about a third of the way up in Minnesota, in a community called St. Cloud. We are the big part of a regional center, and it gets rural very fast. Like half of our county is very small communities and townships. For many people, if they are trying to commute to the Twin Cities, it's an hour and a half plus. But most people in across Minnesota, and certainly across America, that live in rural communities spend way more time than their urban counterparts on the road, on lots of roads, largely, may I say, local roads. So we have a lot of dairy. We have 2 universities and colleges, community colleges, medical, manufacturing. But ag is really at the heart of this for us. So, you know, the infrastructure you're working on in terms of good roads as well as the EV stations is important. So how people can get their goods, products, and services quickly out. The mayor and I have both been talking about how important it is that it's quick, that, you know, we're not just the leftovers, that it's quick for people to be able to get there, and that it helps bring people into our communities. And I know we'll get to talk a bit more about that in a little bit.
Great. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned this issue of getting goods where they need to be. When we're investing in better roads and we're investing in better bridges, even if you don't drive, that's going to matter to you because, you know, being able to get groceries where they need to go, being able to get a community's agricultural projects where they need to be, and doing it quickly, right? I mean, you see when a bridge goes out in a rural area, if it has to be closed or has a load limit because it's not in very good shape, and there are those safety limits on it, you know, that can mean having to go a long way out of your way, and that's an economic issue. So I think that's something that you're right to point out. We're seeing really all over the country. Mayor, tell us what it's like in your community in Colorado and what your residents are counting on when it comes to transportation.
Sure. And first of all, I would like to say thank you, Secretary Buttigieg. And on behalf of the city of Alamosa and the San Luis Valley, we want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to be a part of this conversation about electric vehicles as they relate to rural communities like ours. And it's also a pleasure to meet you, Commissioner Clark. And I also would like to thank Secretary Buttigieg, President Biden, and all the elected officials for the hard work and effort they put into passing this bipartisan, much needed infrastructure bill, because rural communities like ours really need infrastructure funding for our communities to grow and thrive. So Alamosa is located in the San Luis Valley of Colorado, which is south central Colorado. The San Luis Valley, it's about 122 miles long and about 72 miles wide, mostly rural population. Unfortunately, at one time, the San Luis Valley coined the nickname the Valley of Death for motorists who are driving electric vehicles through this rural community because of the sparsity of vehicle charging stations. However, fortunately, we're making strides, but we're not where we need to be. We have 4 charging stations within our community and within our town, but that's nowhere near the amount we need if we're going to try to move forward effectively, efficiently, and making sure that people are not dealing with what we call range anxiety. And that's a challenge people have. And range anxiety means they're not for sure if their vehicle will be able to make it from one destination to the next. And when you add the cold factor, like Commissioner Clark and I experienced this morning when we woke up, it actually reduces the charge on the battery's life. So we got to make sure that we have more fast charging power stations so that we could make travel more safe and help ease some of that range anxiety.
Well, thanks, Mayor. I think you explained it very well in terms of needing to make sure that anybody with an electric vehicle or anybody who's thinking about whether an electric vehicle is right for their family knows that they'll be able to get to where they need to go. You know, these some of these newer cars and pickups, they have 200, 300, 400-mile range, but even then, you know, in rural areas where people are driving long distances on a daily basis, you know, you may not be able to count on just the charge that you get plugging into the wall overnight at home if you have a single family home. And if you don't, then you're going to need help overnight, and definitely going to need help on the road, which is why we've got to get more of these charging stations out there. Mayor, could you say a little more about what you think it'll take for people in your community to feel good about making that transition to electric, whether it's pickups or whether it's cars? I know one thing that we see is maybe a perception out there that electric vehicles are a luxury item, that they're for people in big cities only, and maybe that's how it started out. But I'm really interested in communities, smaller communities, rural communities, being able to tap into the benefits of this electric vehicle revolution. What do you think needs to happen for residents in a community like yours to feel like electric cars and pickups are for them?
Sure, and I got to give credit to Brandon, who's one of our IT directors at the city of Alamosa. He just purchased a brand new EV. And so he's so excited. So when I told him that we're going to be having this conversation, he's been talking my ear off, giving me all these pointers and things. And he said, Ty, what we need in rural communities, we need more of the faster charging stations, and they need to be in just about every small town. We can't have them spaced out 70 miles like in Alamosa. The closest one to us from Alamosa, we have one in Alamosa, but we need multiple ones from here to the next destination. Right now is about almost 80 miles away for him to get a fast power charging station. He mentioned that there are several let's say level 2 charging stations, but they don't charge as fast. And here's why it's important. When you have a fast charging station, it cuts down on the travel time of the travelers who are traveling through these communities. The other thing that we're finding, and we're strategically, our city team and our community partners and our network of providers, they've been thinking strategically, Secretary Buttigieg. We have 3 of the 4 current electric charging stations in our downtown area. And we put them in strategic locations. So when people have to sit and charge for 45 minutes or an hour, however long, they can walk and circulate through our downtown areas, making this an opportunity and an economic lifeline for rural small communities like ours. Our fast EV charging station is strategically located next to our welcoming center. So people, if they have to get out, they can go to this old train depot and they can read about the history of Alamosa. They could pick up brochures to see about all the other activities that are available, like the alligator farm and things like that, and the great sand dunes, and then use that as an opportunity to explore. So we don't want to miss out on the economic potential lifeline for rural small communities as well. In addition to that, we need to work on improving the power grid. Okay, I'm going to say this right now is the time for us to focus on building an effective charging network throughout the United States. And here's why that's important. We have a choice right now. We can either choose to embrace innovation and take the lead, or innovation could leave us behind. And now is not the time for innovation to leave rural small communities behind, especially with the funding we received from that much needed infrastructure bill.
Well, thanks. It's a priority for us to make sure that every part of the country, rural and urban, large communities and small communities, see the benefit of this law. Whether we're talking about rail crossings, road improvements, bridge fixes, definitely when it comes to these EV charging stations. And I'm really encouraged to hear that you're taking that strategic approach, because sometimes the right place for an electric vehicle charging station on our highway network or on our roadways might be a little different than where all the right places were for gas stations. And we should be thinking about that in a smart way. Commissioner, let me turn to you. Speaking of strategically locating these stations, one process that is going to begin later this year for my department is we'll be asking each of the states to submit their plan on how they would deploy those dollars and how they're going to make sure that those chargers get to where they need to go, how you have them add up to a network that really allows people to get everywhere they need to be. So from the perspective of Stearns County, thinking about some of those commuting patterns that you described, where people need to get, whether it's to work or moving agricultural products around, what are some of the things that you would consider important for your state to put into their plan and to think about, so that these federal dollars that we're lining up here in Washington can get to a place like Stearns County and can make a difference in the daily lives of the people you serve?
So glad you asked that question. And I would say, on behalf of counties across the country and our smaller communities such as Alamosa, making sure in the future too that we are able to get money directly. And we appreciate that there are some opportunities within the new legislation where we can apply directly, because sometimes, just like on the federal level, even getting things through a state area can be a little tricky. And like with the American Rescue Plan funds, we all know that we were able to do will be able to do some great things. So strategically, where do you put it? There's a couple good stories that we've seen so far, and we do not have enough in central Minnesota. We have one fast charging station in St. Cloud. That was a public-private partnership. It's connected to our community center, which is downtown. So that's good. We do have an interstate going through our county and a couple of big state highways. But again, most people are driving on other roads. So think about the ways that people can quickly either get in and out to charge. And that could be truck stops. That could be restaurants in a smaller community. We also know in our state, and Mayor Coleman, I don't know if this is true in Colorado, but just about every very small community in our state has a softball field. They have a place that you might be able to get a refreshing beverage, or maybe a place to eat, and a house of worship. So how do we connect into those? Another cool partnership is our Rural Electric Association has partnered to put a few chargers at state parks, because with COVID, as we know, people have been trying to figure out other ways of traveling besides maybe the ways we had before, and they're spending more time. So that's a good start. But how about our county parks or our trails? We have a lot of people who come through Minnesota, and it also connects sometimes for kids going to schools, bike paths, the trails that way. In the winter, they're used for snowmobiles, or they're used for cross-country skiing. If people can start seeing the ways they can connect and find those ways that impact their lives, whether it's local transportation or people helping to revitalize, like we hope broadband, since you brought that up, does. Yeah. So I think, Mayor Coleman, you made an excellent point about the grid and infrastructure there. The more we can actually build once, whether it's building off of our roads, bridges, transit, building off of broadband, and in this case, the electrical, for electrical vehicles, the charging stations, people can start saying, oh, we're being smart with our money while we're making my life easier. So those are some of the things that I think could help, at least in the communities that I either serve or go through quite a bit. I will say, Mr. Secretary, this morning I drove a little over an hour and a half to go to a training, a county tribal training through a number of rural communities. It was minus 18 and the wind chill is minus 35. Wow. So, as we just, again, where are the places we can get them? How do we help people get there? How can they feel the confidence? And so, just like rural electrification once did, and now hopefully broadbandification, the EVs and charging will be a success if our rural communities are at the forefront, not the second stop.
That's a great way to think about it. In the 1930s, America made a decision that the whole country would be able to access electric power because that hadn't been true in rural America. So many parts of rural America well into the FDR years. And then in the 50s, there was a decision that all of the country needed to be connected through an interstate highway system. And now we have a chance to do that with EVs, with broadband. And like you said, whenever we have a chance to build once or dig once, let's do that. It's common sense that if you're going to tear up a certain right of way to lay down fiber, don't come back 2 years later and do the exact same thing in order to put in an electric cable or a water line or a new roadway. If we can do it all at once, that's so much more efficient. And I'll tell you, that's something we're working across the different silos of the federal government to do. I speak so often with my counterparts, Secretary Granholm of the Department of Energy, who's involved in these grid upgrades, Secretary Raimondo, the Department of Commerce. They're taking the lead on the broadband work. And we're constantly at the table together looking for ways to try to make sure we link up what we're doing on the transportation side with all of these other pieces. And nothing brings it together like this example of electric vehicles, right? You got to have the grid and you got to have the charging stations in order to even take advantage of those opportunities to save gas money on those electric cars and pickups that are so important. I know we've already gotten pretty close to the end of our time. I wanted to see if either of you might have any questions that are on your mind or that are on your constituents' minds that would be helpful for my department to think about or to try to make sure that we can answer as clearly as possible so folks know what these investments are going to mean to them.
I will let Commissioner Clark go first, please.
Well, one of the questions, and you've touched on it a little bit, is how is the department working across government, including with local governments, with counties, with smaller communities, to really expand the access in rural communities where the drivers drive longer distances and have longer commutes. And at the same time, if we can figure this one out, it's going to save a lot of money for people given how much they're spending. So can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, like you said, the longer distances you have, the more you drive, the more you're going to save. It's one of the reasons I think rural America is actually one of the best places to bring the electric vehicle revolution. But that we know that's going to require support. So we're working to make sure that rural voices are at the table as we make these plans. There are specific set-asides in so many of the new transportation programs that we're creating and the old ones that are growing thanks to the president's bipartisan infrastructure law with set minimums to make sure that they're going to rural America. And actually, in the last grant round that we did where we were funding transportation projects across the country, we made sure that we went above that minimum to really make sure that no one is being left behind. You mentioned direct support to local communities, and that's important too. We work closely with our state partners, but we also have a number of programs where we can connect directly with local partners. And of course, as a former mayor, that's something I think about a lot, right? How can we clear away some of the different steps and obstacles that sometimes stand between a community and the resources they need? A lot more information about this at our website for the infrastructure bill, build.gov. Has information down to the program of what we're doing and what to expect so that we can hopefully make it as easy as possible for communities of all sizes to tap into and take advantage. Mayor, how about you?
Yes, thank you, Secretary Buttigieg. In rural communities, they are often overlooked in discussions when it comes to transportation. I'm wondering, what is the department doing to inform small rural communities about the potential access to infrastructure upgrades so that rural communities and the residents can take advantage of EVs in the community? And it's a two-part question. That's the first part.
So, that's exactly why we put together this toolkit, and it's online at transportation.gov/rural/EV. to really lay out some of the resources and some of the considerations that local decision makers ought to have on their mind in order to take advantage of the opportunity. Ideas on how to connect into this funding, things you might want to think about as you're being strategic, as you, Mayor, shared your community is already doing about where these charging stations need to go, a sense of the timing and how we're working to make sure all of this adds up into a national network, starting one community at a time. We would definitely encourage any local leaders or anyone who's just interested in this to have a look at that. You can just do an online search for Rural EV Toolkit and see for yourself what we're trying to get out there in terms of good information that we hope people can put to work right away.
Thank you. That's very important because in rural communities, usually they don't have the tax base or the capacity to do infrastructure upgrades and repairs and expansion. So having something easy, accessible for people in rural communities to access is very beneficial. And just my follow-up question to that is what type of report card is going to be used to measure the targeted outcome and show accountability for the money that's being deployed, not only in rural America, but across the United States of America?
That's a great question. And I can tell you the president is asking the same question of the cabinet. He's very focused on making sure that these dollars are well spent. These are huge amounts of money, but they could go out very quickly. And if we're not careful, not see the results we want to. We got to make sure that every dollar is spent accountably. So we're going to make sure that there are very high standards, very specific expectations, and a lot of transparency in terms of where the dollars are going. Just like you're held accountable at those council and commission meetings by residents who want to know where their taxpayer dollars are going. It's the same thing for us, and we take that to heart, and it's one of the reasons why we're working to get the standards on all of these programs just right, and that's something we're doing right now. We want to get those dollars out fast, but we also got to make sure we get them out right. And that's what a whole lot of my coworkers here at the Department of Transportation are sharpening their pencils on even as we speak. Well, I know we went a little longer than we planned, but I really appreciate the chance to speak with each of you, and I want to thank you for your leadership too. I remember from my days in local government that it really is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. Folks know where to find you, they know where you live, they tap you on the shoulder and ask you all kinds of questions, and you're on the hook every day to try to get answers and try to get results. We as a department, we as an administration, we want to be there for you. We want to be user-friendly for you, and I hope that we can continue to stay in touch in the days and in the years ahead.
That sounds great. And thank you. We know that your experience as a mayor, as somebody who's worked with communities across not only your state, but across the country, it really makes a difference. And this toolkit will make a difference. For smaller communities, for more rural communities, the more information we have that doesn't require a lot of technical expertise for some very small communities, the better. So looking forward to being able to put this to good use.
Well, thanks very much, Commissioner. Mayor?
Yes, and I was just going to follow up to say rural communities really appreciate you reaching out because rural communities suffer because lack of information, knowledge, and resources. And by having this toolkit, it's going to help fulfill a void and help, hopefully, us close the gap that we're faced on a regular basis.
Well, thanks. We're definitely side by side in that effort. And really look forward to being able to deliver results. Thanks again for taking the time to join. If you've been watching, thanks for taking a little time to follow this conversation. Hopefully you'll think about what it could mean in your community and in your part of the U.S. And do please take a look at our social media accounts, take a look at our website to get more good information. We're going to keep updating it as these programs come online and we get these dollars out to communities like yours where they can make a difference. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a super fantastic day and don't let anyone steal your joy.
Amen.
You too. Thank you.
You're welcome.